Welcome back. You're watching World Talks, and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. Another day in Ukraine spells more Russian attacks. As of last night, Russian bombings killed at least 5 civilians and injured at least 61 others in Ukraine, regional authorities reported on August 31st. And as this is continuously happening, Monday the 1st marks the 2-week deadline for Putin to schedule a sit-down with Volodymyr Zelenskyy to discuss ceasefire. Joining me now on the program is Bohdan Nahaylo, editor-in-chief of Kyiv Post, to discuss the latest. Thank you so much for joining me on the program with so much happening in recent hours and days. So I would like to start.
Look,
Yes.
I just got back from Odesa yesterday, which was spared the heavy bombing that Kyiv endured in recent days. But overnight, as I was traveling, Odesa was hit, and 30,000 people this morning were without electricity in Ukraine's major port city. And there's a lot of tension in the air here that we're expecting heavy bombardments to follow.
Well, I'm glad to say that I can speak to you and you're safe. It's good to see you all well. I'd like to start by listening to a recent address by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy in a soundbite which we're going to play right now. Let's take a listen.
2 weeks ago in Washington, it was said that at this time the Russians should be ready for real negotiations, for a meeting at the level of leaders. Ukraine is definitely ready for this. But the only thing Russia is doing is investing in further war. All the signals from them are about this. Now, during his visit to China, Putin will again wriggle out of his seat. This is his #1 sport. Everyone in the world has declared that a ceasefire is necessary. Everyone insisted that the war should end.
This is his #1 sport. Everyone in the world has declared that a ceasefire is necessary. So with that deadline approaching fast, what happens next? How do you think Donald Trump is going to react? Are we going to see more stalling? Are we going to see some concrete action from the US? What's your opinion?
On the surface, I don't think much will change. There will be another excuse to prolong the deadline, which is not just 2 weeks. It's lasted months now. Recall, there have been several deadlines that Donald Trump has not met. But I think, look, it's not all as hopeless as it seems. China and India have come out for a ceasefire. Putin is there speaking to many leaders, not just the Chinese leader, and he will feel some pressure. I think it's very difficult for him to just explain and say, we'll go on bombing Ukraine and get whatever we want, a settlement on our terms, a chunk of Ukraine demilitarized, neutralized, etc. So the other good thing, two good things, is that Europe has come together and is discussing concretely now, not just talk, what it should be doing in the next days, weeks to help Ukraine. And significantly, despite the prevarication of Trump, America has agreed in the last few days to sell arms, long-range cruise missiles, hitting further into Russia than Trump had allowed Ukraine before, selling them to Western partners, or rather members of NATO, who will then forward them to Ukraine, which is a good sign because Ukraine desperately needs these weapons. Plus, within Europe itself, talks are going on about crystallizing a position, but in the meanwhile, several countries are giving Ukraine badly needed arms for air defense and for defense on the frontier. So, it's a mixed bag. We're not getting the breakthrough that we have been waiting for months from Trump, but Trump is somehow being sidelined. He thought he was sidelining Europe, but he's being sidelined by the galvanization of Europe because of his inactivity.
We've also heard from Dmitry Peskov, Kremlin spokesperson, upon his visit to China. He said, quote, "We are ready to resolve the problem by political and diplomatic means, but until we see reciprocity from Kyiv, we will continue our special military operation. Over the diplomatic language, definitely a bunch of empty words as provided by the evidence that we've seen over days past after the Ukraine's Independence Day. Is that a clear signal that Russia is actually never going to agree to sit down to a negotiating table?
At this stage, it's not prepared to, and it has to be forced to do that. Look, the special operation was initially to safeguard the so-called victims, Russian-speaking victims in eastern Ukraine. That was the special operation. It wasn't called a war against Ukraine, right? They failed to even take all of the territories. Even I look at my figures here, 75% of the Donetsk region, 90% of Luhansk, and of course they've made progress elsewhere, most notably Zaporizhia. But it's as a special operation, it's been a failure. Why? Because they've not taken all the territory they wanted. They had to retreat from the Kyiv region. And most importantly, and the world should know this, and the Russian people, is that they were not welcomed in these Russian-speaking areas. Nobody came out with bread and salt and said, oh, our liberators have arrived. They've suffered. I mean, and they are suffering in those regions. And the ironic thing is that probably the majority of Ukrainians fighting on the Eastern Front, extensive front, are Russian speakers and many ethnic Russians who consider themselves Ukrainian patriots.
Earlier this week, we've heard from the meeting that took place in Copenhagen in Denmark that multiple sanction options were discussed. We've heard about secondary sanctions, tariffs on Russian products, more efforts against the shadow fleet vessels. And member states were actually asked to come up with their own ideas that are supposed to be presented this week. What new measures do you think we're going to see that would actually push Russia to the negotiating table, but really push it hard?
Look, it's looking better than it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, but we're still not sure what the end result will be. Look, not all European states, even some of the major ones, want to seize Russian assets, or rather use Russian assets to help Ukraine recover. They're agreeing, I think the bottom line is to use the dividends, the interests that come from these seized assets, fine, but there's no agreement on using all of them. Secondly, there's no agreement on boots on the ground in Ukraine to provide assurances once a ceasefire is reached. Several states, important states, have said yes, but many are still considering, including Poland, or have said no. They are saying we will help in other ways. Thirdly, it's very uncertain what the Americans themselves will do. Will they provide the support with intelligence, with air support of some sort to back up the European resolve, or at least the resolve of the coalition of the willing to help Ukraine? So there's still many factors that need to be answered, but the Europeans themselves feel under pressure, and we hope that by the end of next week the picture will be even clearer. But certainly progress is being made. So let's not be too pessimistic or negative, considering, as I said at the outset, the situation a few months ago, a few weeks ago. Progress is certainly being made, and Russia is not helping itself by keeping up these ferocious, deadly attacks on civilians. And let's remember, Ukraine is fighting back and hitting very strategic targets, non-civilian, mainly energy hubs and ammunition depots, factories in Russia. So Russia is feeling economic pressure from these losses. There are problems within the country already. There are problems in standoffs that we see between the FSB and the military. There are grumblings in the political elite. There are in the economic elite. There are certainly grumblings on the ground. The civilian population. Now it's not just the lack of goods; it's the lack of petrol. I mean, oil-producing country which is not providing its population with petrol for cars and basic needs. So we're approaching, I think, a kind of moment of truth, a kind of crossroads. Certainly, Europe is acting differently than it has before. And Trump, whether he wants to sit on the fence or not for longer, he's been forced by circumstances, European pressure, Russian actions, to move and to provide at least more support, more military support than over the last months.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Bohdan Nahaylo, editor-in-chief of Kyiv Post, was my guest. Thank you so much for joining on the program again.
Okay, my pleasure.
And so this would be all for now. Please stay with us. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska. You're watching TVP World, and I'll be back with you in just a moment.